it's one thing to tell me in your personal statement. It's another thing to show me that you're spending your time doing what you're saying you want to do. Welcome to Application Renovation, Season 3, Episode 2. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am great. So, right off the bat, Canadian citizen applying to U.S. medical schools. Talk to me about this application cycle. Any interviews, any interest from schools? How did this application cycle go?
So no interviews. Heard back from 2 schools so far, just saying, no, didn't make a cut for sort of a wait list or anything like that.
Okay.
It's my first time applying MCAT and everything like that. So, I haven't heard any in other schools. I just haven't heard anything back yet. So I'm just assuming the worst at this point and trying to prepare for next round and figure out how I can improve and go on from there.
Yeah. Let's talk about Canadian medical schools. Have you applied to Canadian medical schools previously?
I last year I applied to like my hometown school, and then this year again, and I also applied to some out of province schools.
Yeah.
And I've heard back from out of 5 out of province schools. I've heard back from 2 so far that I didn't get an interview and waiting. Yeah, it's a kind of similar situation.
Okay. Have you gotten any feedback yet on your applications?
No, it's actually pretty hard. A lot of the schools, because of the volume of applicants, don't give feedback, and I just here anyway trying to find something that's reputable and going to give me honest feedback. I'm still trying to find if it's worth it or who can really do that for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Well, I'd love to dive into your application. I have a bunch of notes on it. We'll ask you some questions along the way and hopefully give you some good advice to move forward for the next application cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
Ready to go?
Yes.
All right. So one thing I always love to start out with is when you submitted your application. So you submitted relatively late, August 25th, and it wasn't verified for another month. What was the delay for you in the process?
My MCAT got delayed this year, pushed back because of COVID. So I was waiting to get that result because the previous ones that I had written, it just didn't go well. So I just wanted to see what I got. And I didn't start. So, as soon as I got it, then I was, starting to do that application and didn't really realize how involved it was or what needed to be done. So a little bit behind the 8 ball, just trying to get it done with working. And so just late, not really aware of the whole timeline and process.
Okay. Very, very common mistake. And again, being Canadian, the Canadian medical schools don't have rolling admissions like we have in the States, so there's less pressure to get it in sooner up there. So one thing that stands out. So as we get through your application, nothing looking through the kind of demographics, nothing stands out. We get to your disadvantaged essay, which you did mark yourself as disadvantaged, and you talk about working to contribute to the family. 8 years old, you had your first paper route. I think that's about the same age I was when I had my paper route. I loved having a paper route. It was fun.
That was good.
You talked about the money that you earned going to bills and groceries, right? So you're painting this picture of your background, your upbringing, and how it was likely different than others. And this disadvantaged essay really comes down to, did you have the same opportunities as other people? And here you're painting this picture that clearly you did not. And that's the whole point of this disadvantaged essay. So I think you did a good job. The one question that I had reading through your disadvantaged essay was you talked about you dreamed of being a doctor, but it wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
Why did you bring this up in your disadvantaged essay?
I don't know. I think just maybe not realizing how to like best utilize that space. Okay. And just with things that are going on, I don't know if I just trying to fit it in and explain that in terms of like the opportunity that it just at the time and where I was, I just didn't feel like it was possible, and I was wanting to try to get into something where I could start working as soon as possible. So maybe it wasn't the best place to put it, and just not being fully aware of how I can kind of frame that and where, how to show things a little bit better.
Okay. Makes sense. I really love how you closed out your disadvantaged essay. You talk about, I've learned to turn any negative into a positive, and I owe it to my disadvantaged upbringing for providing every opportunity to do so and become who I am today. So right, you turn this situation and say, look, it's made me who I am, and I'm thankful for that. So good job with that. A lot of people fear that the disadvantaged essay is that they're gonna be pitied for what they write in there, and here you're showing, oh, don't pity me. Like this has caused me to be who I am. So good job. We looked through no red flags from an institutional action standpoint or felonies, misdemeanors, etc. So good job with that. And then we get to your grades, and you start off decent. You have the C+ here with knowledge and reality, which is kind of funny, right? Are you struggling? Do you think we're in a simulation? We get to again going down through your grades. Junior year, when you change schools, now all of a sudden we got a D in microbiology, a C- in gross human anatomy. Pharmacy skills 1. So interesting. You change schools and you change focus. Talk about that change there. So just to capture for people watching, you are a pharmacist, which is interesting because it's a bachelor's degree in Canada apparently. Not here in the States.
It changed it now to match how it is in the States. Entry to practice, PharmD. But when I was interesting. So that was changing universities, was to enter that pharmacy program, and I try to address, I guess, later on the grades aspect and just what was kind of going on externally and things like that. Yeah. But that's where that change comes in, and not sure if I answered the question, but that's kind of what that is. That second portion or change of school is basically, the pharmacy program now.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, so we continue on, and then just the grades are the biggest thing that stood out to me as I was scrolling through, going, this isn't going in a good direction, right? I always talk about trends. Yeah. And for you, I have this big red line, not a huge red line, a red line going from 366, 378, 296, 210. Right, for your science GPA. And then for your all other GPA, it's kind of interesting. It went the other way. 265, 27, 311, 321. Not as drastic. But that really stands out as like what went on here. And you do talk how you try to bring it up later as well. So that to me, right off the bat, is something's going on. I don't know what it is at this point, but this is a big concern for me.
Yeah.
You're sitting here applying to medical school. You're working as a pharmacist now, which is great. Obviously, great experience. You're in the medical field. You obviously got through your pharmacy training, even though it was different back then. But you're saying, I'm ready for medical school. From an academic standpoint, it doesn't show that, right?
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of fear around your ability to do well in school. And do well in school means finish in 4 years and pass the boards the first time. Medical schools are going to fear your ability to do that because of this trend. And so that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is, okay, what are we going to do to work on that? MCAT wise, you took the MCAT a few times and then you crushed it your last time here with a 512. What did you do differently to have such a big change in your MCAT score?
To be honest, there was just really no distractions that summer. So the first time I wrote it, I skimmed the books and read the psychology because I maybe 2 weeks before and no car study.
Yeah.
The second time, about 8 weeks before, was when my father had it was an accident. He passed away. He was in the hospital for about 8 weeks. So 8 weeks leading up to the test, I didn't touch a book, but I felt like and I'm going to write this and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then this time, I mean, he passed away, but I was able to work and study and I kind of figure out how to do that and balance everything. And I managed to do well, but I still blew it on cars. But yeah, I was just able to, kind of do what I always knew that I was capable of. Just, I'm working hard and study and really focus. And that was a big difference. Yeah. Just nothing else going on. Yeah.
And going back up, I think we have your languages here, Punjabi and French, and English. So it sounds like you are a native English speaker, but other languages were spoken often as well. And so maybe there's a little bit of an ESL-ish kind of trend there with your CAR score. So an interesting thing there.
I did well in practice, but I think who knows?
Yeah.
Blew it in the air.
Yeah. And the CAR score for me, that is not something that's like, you need to retake the MCAT to fix your CAR score. That's not something I'm concerned about. Obviously, one of the biggest, it's a myth/misconception around Canadian medical schools is they all want really high CAR scores. There's a few schools that want that, and that's what they care about, but not all Canadian schools care about that. All right, and then we get to your activity section. And the first thing that stood out to me is a question. You have your hospital pharmacist that started February 2020, and you projected it out to August 2021, which is the right thing to do. But you have this overlap with your, and I marked it here, page 13, your community pharmacist. You projected that out as well to August 2021.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're both full-time-ish positions. Are they not?
Community, I was always picking up shifts. So at the time I was hired as a casual, I guess. So on call and stuff, but those
per diem is what we call it here in the States, a per diem.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So up until I had applied, and in August, it was full time because I was training, and then they definitely needed people, but I was still picking up extra shifts. So I knew that at some point after summer and in the fall that would change, and I would still be working in community. I would be doing both.
Okay. Perfect. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a mistake there. So,
yeah.
All right. So, obviously, when we say pharmacist, a lot of times clinical experience doesn't shout out to me. But when you have this hospital pharmacist, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit different. And it sounds like you're an integral member of the team. What a lot of people here in the States, we consider PharmDs to be kind of a part of the hospital team, and is rounding on patients and providing advice. So it sounds like that's what you're doing. Definitely clinical experience, definitely a great experience for you. And so I loved a lot of your experiences. I think you did a good job of kind of bordering on not trying to sell, not trying to do just basic job descriptions, but really highlighting these things. And your experience description right off the bat, you talked about finding this gap of knowledge when you first start and going, okay, there's a problem, but I'm going to go learn. And you have this delirium consult in the ER, and that's what you've been studying. And so you kind of helped out, right? So a little bit of a story there to lead off, right? So good job with that. You, for your most meaningful experience for this hospital pharmacist position, you talked about becoming a hospital pharmacist to expand your knowledge, being a junior member of the team, etc. So a lot of basic information for the most part to start. And then you talked about becoming an integral part of the team and was sought regularly for my expertise. So a little bit of a sales pitch there. But you could have told a story, right? Tell a story of a time where you were called for your expertise, a difficult patient. You told a little bit of one with the delirium protocols to begin with, but maybe there's another patient, another difficult patient that you as a team or you alone had to come up with a treatment plan, et cetera, to help. So overall, decent job with a lot of your experiences.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry. The most meaningful part, I don't know, like, how is it different than the first one? Like telling a story in the first one, and then if I say this is most meaningful, tell another story, or
Yeah. So usually for ones where you are marking most meaningful, you don't necessarily have to tell a story in the first part, the experience description. Okay. You can. The most meaningful, at the heart of that is why. Why was this most meaningful? Okay. And I think a lot of students fail to answer that question. They just focus on telling a story because that's what Dr. Gray says to do, and they don't really answer the question of this is why it was most meaningful. And remember that most meaningful doesn't have to be why medicine, right? It's not most meaningful for me to pursue this path. It's just most meaningful to me as a human being. So really, the story should lead into that conclusion of this is why it was most meaningful to me.
Okay. Thank you.
The crisis line volunteer experience that you have, you started in May 2019, ended August 2020. You have here many calls struck a chord as people were dealing with very similar conditions that I had dealt with myself.
Yeah.
That raises a little bit of a red flag to me. Are you trying to hint that you have some mental health things and you've called crisis hotlines yourself? Are you just kind of going back to the stress that you've had in your life with your father and other things? Like there's a huge question mark that comes when I read something like that. So you have to be careful with the information that you're putting out there. Mm-hmm. What was your goal with that line there?
I guess during the training was what initially when my kind of dad had his accident in the hospital. So I guess, I don't know, it was just in that moment and at that time, it was kind of everything that was going on. So I felt like, like people call in, loss of a friend, a family member. So very similar in that regard. Yeah. And I just, so similar. And I maybe wanted to show like, this happened, but I still wanted to, help and volunteer. And, it's something that I guess empathy and things like that in terms of going through a similar situation and being able to help somebody through that. But I get what you're saying. For sure.
So again, kind of going back to the whole storytelling aspect, you could have told a story of one of these calls that really resonated with you, maybe because it reminded you of yourself, and drawing it out into more of a story would have made it clear what you were talking about in that situation. Yeah. The admissions interviewer, I highlighted here that you mark this as medical clinical. It's not medical clinical, being a kind of admin interviewer for pharmacy school. So just kind of a miscategorization for that. Not a huge deal. It's only 10 hours. Nobody's gonna to really get mad at you for that. But don't worry about that. Again, a line in here that gives me pause is you said, what worried me was the repetitive nature of the task. Yeah. Right? Everything in life is repetitive, if you haven't noticed. Right? As a pharmacist, things are repetitive. As a physician, things are going to get repetitive. And you're giving a hint as to your personality with this sentence here. They're going to be bored of everything at some point. Right? And maybe that's not a good thing to be highlighting. Right. Because what we get through in life, we have to be okay with the boredom and the repetitive nature. So again, just be careful with those negative comments. The teaching, tutoring, lecture facilitator you have here, sometimes it was difficult to deliver feedback while still inspiring them to learn and to grow. I found myself storytelling often. I really love this description here. Again, potentially telling a story as to one of these times that you did that with a student, but really focusing on that good stuff there. So I like that. Working as a pharmacy manager, so having this as leadership, a great opportunity to show impact in some way. You do that right off the bat by talking about leading a team of 15 people. That shows me a lot about who you are with your ability to do that. And at the very end, you said we started a diabetic care clinic that everyone was eager to be a part of. Right? What was the impact of that? You lost an opportunity to show some impact with how many patients you served, how many lives you saved, or whatever that potentially you could have added there. Again, basketball coach. I love that you put basketball coach in here. It shows a lot about your personality. It shows a lot about who you are. A lot of people will not put similar experiences on their application because they think, well, it's not related to medicine. I shouldn't put it on my application. But you talking about coaching 7 and 8-year-olds, well, number one, that tells me a lot about hopefully your disposition, that you're patient enough to deal with these people. You obviously are a good enough communicator to deal with these young people. And at the very end, you talked about how you adapted your coaching style to these players and how the drills became games and the floor became lava. Right? That tells me a lot about who you are without you sitting there and selling, I am a flexible and adaptable person and I can adjust everything that I do to the needs of other people. Right? You didn't have to spell that out. You told me in this story, and that's why I love the power of stories, because you told me in a couple sentences without really bashing it in my face a lot about who you are with this one little extracurricular activity.
Okay.
The pharmacy student preceptor, again, really great story of helping the student who was struggling. So you, I hope, learned from me to really focus in on these stories and show your impact. Yeah. You did a really good job with your activity descriptions.
Okay.
And then finishing out with the other experiences here, from the community pharmacist to your cardiovascular clinic. No huge notes to take from there. The small tweak I put here for diabetic foot clinic.
Yeah.
At the very end, you said, it was my time delivering bad news, but we ended on a positive note as I shared what measures they could take to improve their blood sugars. So again, just the ability to turn that into a small little story to highlight a specific person and not just kind of generically telling the story. Your research lab, talking about medical images analysis, lab research assistant, you got into a little bit of selling here. At the very end, you said, I had, in fact, already read them on my own. It was a valuable lesson in professionalism and being accountable for my own work, right? So a little bit of selling of like, ooh, look how amazing I am. I did this all on my own. And then we get to your tutor in elementary, high school, university. Nothing huge to take away from here, other than it's missing a period at the end. So just a small little grammar thing.
Does that count as a character?
It does.
Yeah, maybe that's why.
I would rather you tweak something else than to leave out a punctuation just to get under character count. And then grocery clerk. So again, a lot of students will avoid putting in a grocery clerk because they're like, well, it has nothing to do with medicine. I'm not going to put it in. But you put this in there. It shows kind of who you are, the things that you're doing while you're also going to school and everything else. So really good job putting in these activities. All right, and then we get to personal statement. And here's where I think you have a lot of room for improvement. So we start off with this interesting little hook here, right? Once we remove the ventilator, he will have 24 to 48 hours to live. And it's like, okay, who are we talking about here? Obviously, we get to the fact that your father was hit by a car and suffered the TBI. We get a little bit of the MCAT approaching, so we see that it's potentially impacting your MCAT score. You finish this with, for myself, the situation galvanized my resilience and ambition. So a little bit of selling, right? I'm resilient, I'm ambitious. But we move on from this paragraph without any other meaning behind it, right? So it's like you added this hook just because you thought it would be interesting to hook them. But then you were like, okay, I'm done with that. Let me move on to everything else that I want to talk to you about. You could have done a great job honing in on why this made you want to be a physician. Did this experience kind of solidify your decision to be a physician? And maybe it didn't, and that's okay. And maybe this is just there to be maybe a little bit of a red flag statement to talk about why you struggled with your MCAT the second time, which I don't think you need at all, because you obviously did great on your MCAT the third time. For students in similar situations, I don't think you need to explain away poor MCAT scores when you crush the MCAT eventually. And so again, I think there was a missed opportunity here to reflect more on this situation to show a bigger impact on you. You kind of go back into a little bit of your disadvantaged essay moving forward, talking about how you grew up and the disadvantages that you had. So a little bit of kind of duplicating some information because you've mentioned it already and now you're mentioning it again. And so did we really need to do that? You talked about challenging to balance studies, work, and deteriorating situation, right? So potentially focusing in on here's why my grades were going down. And my inability to cope reflects in my academic performance. And what's interesting here is you say, I take full ownership over my performance as I still achieved excellent results in certain situations.
Yeah.
It's a very confusing statement. You're like, I take ownership of my performance, but I still crushed it, right? It's like, are you taking ownership, or are you trying to brag that you still were able to crush it? I don't understand what this statement's supposed to do here. But then you go right back to some humility and say you hadn't learned how to cope consistently, but once you did, your professional career flourished, but the academic career is still the biggest question mark, right?
Yeah.
So you talk about becoming a pharmacist and doing all of that. You get in here with James, this patient here, and so you get into a story, which is great. And then again, I think you missed an opportunity to reflect. So you finished here by saying, my desire to help others strengthened everyday working in this environment, and I would like to be part of that in a greater capacity as a physician. So you're connecting, I'm working as a pharmacist, I want to be a physician, but there's really no connection to make that clear why that is. And so especially coming from another healthcare field, you really need to draw those lines, right? Think of the crazy guy with the red string going all throughout the walls of their house to connect all these conspiracy theories. You really need to do a little bit of that with your personal statement to say, here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and here's why. You're really you're highlighting that, not just I love being a pharmacist, but I want more, so I might as well be a physician.
Okay.
Gotta be a little bit clear here.
Yeah.
Your next paragraph, you talked about, I'm always looking for ways to challenge myself. So again, a little bit more of that sales pitch of like, I'm a pharmacist, but I like challenging myself, so I might as well be a physician. So it's like it's a weak connection that you're trying to draw. And from that point forward in this essay or this paragraph, I don't really know why the paragraph is there. You talk about becoming a hospital pharmacist, which you already mentioned earlier in your extracurricular activity, that you became a hospital pharmacist to expand your knowledge, right? There's a hierarchy to the pharmacy team. From the very beginning, I was determined to prove myself. You attended weekly meetings. So this is like your hospital pharmacy extracurricular description that just happens to be in your personal statement. Why did you put this in your personal statement?
So I guess big thing is missed the mark with the purpose of it. I was just, I guess, trying to show like who I am, like what's happened so far, and maybe kind of demonstrate kind of the person that I am or what I'm trying to do. So
maybe just overall missing the mark with, how to best kind of craft something. And like you said, could focus on the stuff with my dad, or even solidifying. I was trying to piece in like the why and address academics, and maybe just trying to do too many things. Try to do too many things and just missing the mark.
Okay. You get into, and this is potentially what you mean by missing the mark. You talked about trying to shadow some of these ER docs or pharmacists in other areas, shadowing, observing the physicians, and even after an 18-hour shift of being on call, they would still take the time for me, right? Their schedules were grueling, and they were not always in the limelight, but I find the work they do incredible and inspiring. So to me, you're trying to say, and here's why I want to be a physician, but you miss the mark, because a layperson who doesn't want anything to do with medicine can find the work of physicians to be incredible and inspiring. That doesn't mean you should be a physician. You could stay a hospital pharmacist and still finds their work to be incredible and inspiring. Okay. So really the reflection, the stories, what you're trying to focus on needs to highlight, why do you want to do this? Okay, that's where you miss the mark there. And then you get into, there's a little bit of this timeline resume kind of feel to it, right? Working on the crisis line was a profound experience. You already told me that in your extracurricular activities. As a pharmacist, I had a tendency to home in on certain details and begin problem solving immediately, right? That's a repeat from your extracurricular activity. You specifically state that as one of your challenges. But then you talk about an opportunity to take a step back and see people with greater perspective. I wasn't sure if I could continue, as I didn't want to be a liability with everything going on with your father. Again, there's this paragraph here that I'm like, why are you telling me this? Again, I don't know why this is here. What's that there for?
Same thing, I guess, just trying to show maybe like what I was doing, what I've done, kind of things going on outside of, so I guess home life or whatever you want to call it. Like these things are all going on, and I just, tried to keep going. So not really addressing the why, but just trying to show maybe more detail, what I've been doing, what's going on, here's what I'm doing. And maybe I thought I would show it, but
Yeah. And I think, the last sentence of this paragraph, right, is allowed me to persevere and to continue. I think a lot of your focus potentially was distracted because you're trying to show, look, I've been through a lot. I'm still here. So obviously I should be a physician, right? You're like, so obviously you should accept me. But the goal of this is, why do you want to do this? Not just that you're still here, knocking on the door trying to get in.
Right.
Okay. You talked about with your conclusion here, your path to become a physician, many turns. Great. Each has presented itself with an opportunity to learn and grow. Great. My motivation for public service is personally driven. And then talking about witnessing how difficult it can be to access healthcare in underserved communities. I don't know how much that's needed there. Again, conclusions, I think, are your opportunity to highlight where you want to go in the future. What are you hoping to do? What are you hoping to accomplish? So a potential missed opportunity. I like your last sentence here. My experiences with these groups inspired me to seek a greater role as a physician to lead and direct patient care. And that's the basic part of it, but expand and grow from there. And how you want to impact. So a lot of missed opportunity for personal statement. That's where I think your application can really shine moving forward, is a better personal statement. And then talk about, as a Canadian citizen, how you picked the schools that you applied to.
I use the MSAR from MCAS, and then my wife helped me actually a lot with just going through and finding all the schools that had data that showed that they accepted Canadians, or how they view a Canadian applicant, whether it's international or in-state or or the same. So I try to use those schools, and then a couple of the other ones, I kind of looked at their mission for primary care, serving disadvantaged communities, which was what my goal was. And obviously I didn't really explain that well in the personal statement, and they're also, looking at disadvantaged groups per se, to say, give these people an opportunity to become physicians. And it was like Howard and Meharry in particular. So I kind of picked those schools, and then,
So I would caution the last thing you said there about showing that you want to serve disadvantaged communities in your personal statement. Usually the place to show that is with the activities that you've done. Right? It's one thing to tell me in your personal statement. It's another thing to show me that you're spending your time doing what you're saying you want to do. Right. So there's an opportunity there in your personal statement. All right. So that's a great job. MSAR for Canadian applicants, I think, is very important. Looking not only at schools that say they accept Canadian applicants, but how many are they actually interviewing? How many are they actually accepting? And then a lot of students may not know, as you mentioned, some schools will see Canadian students as true international students. Some will see them as what would be considered an out-of-state, but a resident of the U.S., but just an out-of-state student. So do your research there and find schools that will be friendly to Canadians. All right, let's go back up to your GPA and talk about what we can do moving forward to improve your chances of getting in, not only with a better story in your personal statement, but also with a stronger GPA. Being in Canada, what are the options for you to take more classes?
It's probably the 1 or 2 year, these postbac programs, considering masters. I mean, it has to kind of be a focused program rather than just taking a bunch of random classes. Because I think even for my situation in Canada, once you do get to the point, they'll look back and kind of see, okay, you just took a bunch of random easy classes to bump up the marks. And so 1 or 2 year, I think, post-bac programs, potentially a master's, but just kind of weighing that with work and how to best go forward.
Yeah, I think that's going to be your best bet, probably a post-bac versus a master's. If you can find a program that is maybe part-time so you can continue working, continue paying the bills, that may be the best situation for you. Obviously, in your situation, working as a pharmacist now, full-time, plus some, it looks like, you're going to have to kind of find the perfect balance of work plus family life plus school, where school can get enough attention that you do well in it so that you're not continuing to dig a deeper hole as you move forward.
Okay.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest maybe sort of barrier or hurdle that I'm thinking is that, do this, if it's a year full-time into it, then I kind of sacrifice my professional career for a little bit, or those extracurriculars and hours that I'm kind of putting towards the patient care clinic. So I was thinking, if I can do more of that and build more of that, will that be enough to kind of overshadow or, kind of add to my application, with the poor academic performance that I have at the moment. So I'm not sure if that's enough, or if, just take the classes, do what you got to do, get those grades higher.
I think your focus needs to be on grades first, and adjust your work to be able to still continue to bring in the income that you need, and not worry about, quote unquote, sacrificing your career because you want to cut the career off at its head, right? You want to change careers. So I wouldn't worry about maintaining your knowledge base and your skills, etc., for being a pharmacist. Because that's not what you want to do. You want to be a physician. So focus kind of everything around what you need to do school-wise, and then how does work and family life fit into that? Obviously, knowing that you're going to have some sacrifices moving forward, but still putting a roof over your head and food on the table, etc.
Okay, yeah. That was my biggest sort of question going into this, is does my application have a a snowball's chance in hell, even with everything going on, or can I build on other things without going back to school?
Without going back to school? Without going back to school,
yeah.
I don't think you have a good shot, because the question is going to be, are you going to pass medical school?
Right.
You
right.
struggled in pharmacy school, and maybe we can contribute that to everything going on in your life, or maybe you're just bad at sciences, right? And so there's a huge question mark there that you have to overcome. I don't think you can kind of deflect away from your grades and put more into being a pharmacist and rack up 30,000 hours and go, oh, look, see, I should be a physician.
Right.
That doesn't ease any fears or concerns about your academic performance.
Is my MCAT score where it is competitive?
Yeah, your MCAT score is great.
Being even considered an out of state, okay.
Your MCAT score to me isn't an issue. Obviously, a higher MCAT score always helps more. But do you want to take it again at the end of the day? Now, you may have to take it again depending on postbac programs and the length of those. By the time you finish those, your MCAT score may be quote unquote expired by the time you apply again. That's just something you'll have to figure out as you move forward.
Okay. And then maybe I kind of felt as I was reviewing this before we met here, some of my explanations, just kind of that selling, as you said, I'm really inspired and it motivated me to be a physician, is kind of generic. I think what I gathered from that is try to switch that, remove that, and maybe just talk more in the story, or more detail on the story. Is that would you say the best way that I can improve?
Yeah, and the story is there to really just solidify in the reader's mind who you are and why this is truly motivating you to become a physician. Not that you're in awe and inspired by these physicians, but what it is that drives you to be one.
Okay.
That's the biggest switch there.
Okay. And personal statement, focus on the why more so than anything else.
You got it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck moving forward.
Okay, thanks a lot.